So you've been exposed to people managing money and trying to hold on to their net worth and build on it for many years. Is there a commonality you've seen? I haven't prepared you for this. In their personalities or the way they look at life or the way they handle things that you're always kind of amazed by? Or something that you're like, oh shit, the people who are able to create some wealth and hold on to it are typically like this?
For the most part though, they are self-made. So I don't deal with billionaires, but I deal with a crap ton of multimillionaires. And for the most part, they're self-made. They have not inherited the money. The commonality I see with these people is they want to associate themselves with other people who are going to improve them, who are like-minded. That's the number one thing. B, they have a lot of grit. C, they have patience. And they were interested in money. These are the things that I see.
That last one, it's weird because you have to be interested in money, I feel. But if your primary driver in life, and I'm sure we both know these people, is just money, I feel it's not a satisfying life. So you can be interested in money, but serve people through your business, through flipping homes. But I find that people who are solely interested in just the bank account number growing or just the money growing don't have a fulfilling life. So I find that the people that have some net worth that I really respect the most, and they're living life in a way of serving others, and that seems to give them purpose and fulfillment versus just growing the bank account. Those people, I find something in their life usually snaps.
Money doesn't buy happiness,
It really
but
doesn't.
it really does alleviate misery. And it's going to buy you the ability to have influence. So money is, in my opinion, it's an important thing. Obviously, I deal with money every day. And when you're dealing with people's money, not institutions' money. I left the institutional world in 2010 and I went to the individual world and I started dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people's money, you are inadvertently dealing with all aspects of their life, especially when you're dealing with people's individual money, not just one asset class. If I'm doing, I have many clients where I'm doing everything. I'm their investment advisor. I have custody of their assets. I'm their accountant. I'm kind of doing everything, right? As they age, they're communicating with you on many different things because the flow of money in your life is going to affect all these different things to the point where I have multiple final text messages from people. I'm literally the advisor on their will and the advisor to their estate trustee. It's one of those things where being involved with people and being involved with people's money, it allows you to sort of get into their lives, get into their family life, and you learn a lot about like patterns of human behavior,
family relationships,
secrets that people keep from each other.
God,
it's crazy.
Right. Yeah. And then you always have to be learning too, because today's economy is so wild to me because I started really deeply digging into the economy in 2008 during that financial crisis that caught me off guard. Like our family almost lost everything in the 1990s in real estate. And then when 2008 hit and we didn't know how impacted Canada would be, even though I'm in real estate, I still don't know anything about how the greater economy works. And that started my deep dive into the economy. And now I feel like the economy is in a state with the amount of some of the demographic influences, some of the influences of technology, some of the influences of a debt-based system reaching a huge debt to GDP number. Like there's all these huge kind of macro factors really leave us in a time where many people don't know what the future is going to bring or how to play the future. But when you look at the world today and the setup of the economy today and investing today, is it possible to still make investments in the traditional approach and get ahead?
So when you say the traditional approach, I'm assuming you mean like market-based securities. In actual fact, I mean, maybe it's because I grew up with European immigrants. Owning land and owning real estate, I would consider to be traditional.
Okay.
Right. But I understand what you mean from the North American perspective. I think that the wealthy have always seen land ownership and real estate as a traditional asset class.
That's fair, sure.
The banks would have you possibly think differently in that securities are traditional, but land and buildings and being a landlord were around a lot longer than market traded securities. Real estate requires a level of sophistication that is over and above buying a mutual fund, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I've personally seen people achieve a lot of wealth. Have they achieved extravagant wealth? No. In order to achieve extravagant wealth, you're going to have to take a risk over and above the traditional approach. You're going to need to either get in on some ground up companies that are going to explode. You're going to need to start your own business and sell it for a lot of money down the road, or you're going to need to buy real estate and land in a pocket that is growing that outpaces inflation, or M2 as you track it. It's going to significantly outpace inflation and apply leverage to it. Those are the only ways that I see you can build wealth from the ground up.
So where then does real estate fit into a financial plan when you're talking to people? Do you introduce it as a new concept? Is it in everybody's financial plan? How do you approach it? And you keep saying land too. So I want to get your take on land, because land to me is a little slightly different game within the realm of what we typically talk about, which are income producing properties. But where does real estate fit in your thinking and when you discuss this with your clients?
Let's define first real estate from a financial perspective, and we'll define financial planning. So real estate, I want you to look at it from the basics. It's an asset class like any other asset class. What is an asset? An asset is something that has immediate value based on the perception, the likelihood of a future cash flow. That's all it is, right? Whether it's stocks, bonds, GICs, cash. But real estate in the context that you guys are dealing with, right? You have to break it down a little further. What type of asset class is it? Primarily, it's land. It's a commodity. So like any other commodity, there is a limited amount of it. And the land that we currently use really is land on ground or above ground. We're not really digging ditches and building factories or commercial properties underground or property underground. So there's a limited amount of it, and there's theoretically an unlimited amount of people that want it. So there's a supply and demand component to it. But what we do is we put some sort of a structure on it that will create a cash flow for us. So you have multiple streams of cash flow. You have the rental profits, and then you have the possible appreciation of the land down the road. So it's very different from, let's say, a GIC. With real estate, there's a lot of unknowns that you don't see. Real estate fluctuates in value like any other asset based on supply and demand, based on, whatever macroeconomic factors exist, and based on your own microeconomic factors as well. So it's an asset class that fluctuates in value like any other asset class, but psychologically it doesn't, because you don't see a ticker, right? You don't see a mark to market on every minute. So how does it fit into your financial plan? It's just an asset class. That's all it is. I find that one of the biggest problems is people treat it like a religion. I believe in real estate, or I believe in this. This isn't a religion, right? Look at it like a fact, right? It's an asset class. Use facts to support an argument. I like real estate because of A, B, C, D, and E. Religion requires you to take a leap of faith. So we know what real estate is, at least from my perspective. It's a commodity with a revenue generating business constructed on top of it that will provide a future cash flow discounted to today. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to underpay for that asset so that you can generate revenue to sustain it, pay off the mortgage, pay the expenses, have a profit, and then get a larger cash flow at the end. So I always tell people, I say, listen, worst case scenario, you put 20% down, break even for the next 25 years, and the property did not go up in value at all. You 5x your money. If the property doubled in value, you've 10x your money. It's pretty simple. The other thing people have to think about is direct investment in real estate does require a little bit of work. So it's kind of like a hybrid between investment and running a business. So you should be rewarded more than with a purely passive investment like a mutual fund or an ETF, or just buying a basket of bank stocks or something like that. There's a business component to it. So you should be expecting a better rate of return over the long run than a purely passive investment. We'll rewind. What is financial planning? Financial planning is a concept that's been, in Canada at least, dominated by the banks or dominated by large institutions as a method mainly to sell their products, which there's nothing wrong with that. They're in the business of selling their products, their financial products. So, you'll come in, you'll get a free financial plan. And the conclusion seems to always be
3 diversified mutual funds.
Whatever the heck it is. But the idea is a financial plan is exactly the same as a business plan. It's the same thing. That's all it is. It's a business plan for you and your family. Money, like it or not, is what's going to drive the quality of your life. It's going to get your kid into the better school. It's going to put clothes on your back. It's going to put food on the table. It's going to put shelter over your head. So the inflow and outflow of money is very important to the quality of your life and even the extent of your life, because wealthy people on average live longer than less wealthy people. It's just a fact of life. So the ability to manage your money and to understand it, that's what financial planning is. And it's, in my opinion, a very important. So financial planning is really at its core, it's like a business plan. You start with your like net worth statement. You start with, okay, where do I stand right now? Then you pick different spots in life, different phases in life, and you say, where do I want to be at each one of those different phases? How do I get there financially? So the bulk of financial planning, when you look at like social media or whatnot, the bulk of financial planning is concentrated on what? The investment component. Mm-hmm. The first part of a financial plan, when I consulted for it, right? The first thing I say is, okay, everybody wants to be rich. Who doesn't want to be rich? Let's define rich first. So why don't you define what rich is?
For me,
Yeah.
time freedom. I want to spend it with my family, friends, and have experiences. So it's less on the money, but how much time freedom do I have in my life to work on the things that are meaningful to me, spend my time and days with the people I want to spend them with. I think to me that is right now what I would consider being, I hate the word, but rich.
Okay. This is an extremely common response that I get from my
Shit, I'm not unique?
No.
Come on.
I'm sorry.
Holy shit.
Yeah. We're going to make you unique.
Okay, got it.
I say that's all great, but, and my definition of rich is it's not, okay, you're at 10 million bucks, you're rich. You're at 20 million bucks, you're rich. It's really based on what you're looking for. And I want to give you the life that you want defined in monetary terms. So whatever life you want,
that's a nice way to say it.
Right? Yeah. You have to have a pot of investments that are going to pay you a certain amount of revenue that will sustain your desired lifestyle for as long as you want it to be sustained, while at the same time leaving the financial legacy that you want to leave, all based on reasonable projections. So you can't come and say, okay, well, listen, my life, we've defined what you want, create a budget. I don't want to work. I want to have complete freedom to do A, B, C, D, and E. And my life is going to cost me today $150,000 a year. And I think that I'm going to generate a return on investment of 15% forever. Therefore, I need $1 million. Stupid plan. Right? Because we're probably not going to be able to generate a sustainable rate of return of 15%. So you're going to need to come up with some sort of a plan to get you to that amount of money or that amount of investment or the type of investment that is going to pay you that rate of return, giving you the cash flow to live your life the way you want and to leave what you want to leave to your children or whatever, to charity. Or ultimately, age and different phases of life affect your money differently because your desires change. A lot of people come to me and they'll want a financial plan in their 50s. That is the typical time when people want a financial plan. One of my most recent comprehensive planning clients, he just turned 50 and they have 2 children, both young adults. One is just graduating university soon. The other one, great person, actually quite intelligent and works, but the child does have Down syndrome, but is healthy and is expected to live probably till 80 and will require financial support after the death of the parent.
Yeah.
So in a situation like this, wealth has to extend far beyond their lifespan. It's not a matter of, I'm going to leave my kids $1 million each. No, but there's a big caveat. It's, we want to make sure that this kid not only survives, but thrives for their entire life. Until they pass away, without ignoring the other child, without putting a huge financial burden on the other child to take care of their sibling.
Where do you even start with that? That's a huge amount of time.
This was a months of work to get the plan going for them. And their plan, they had assets, a lot of cash, some RSPs and whatnot. And the conclusion was actually a combination of traditional, like individual stocks, some ETFs, a rental property, and a life insurance policy because they have a corporation. So it made sense. The reason being is that we could time everything out whereby 1 or 2 rental properties could be left as a legacy to the child who doesn't have the disability, but a large wad of cash could be left in trust for the child with the disability. My job is to help them plan around it and to work with what they have. So they want to build wealth. They want to leave generational wealth. but they also want to be able to sustain a lifestyle for the disabled child. In order to sustain a lifestyle for the disabled child, what's the number one thing we're going to need? We're going to need liquidity, because we're going to need to pay for this child on a monthly basis. So the real estate component is absolutely not going to work to take care of that kid for the rest of her life. We're going to need something much more liquid. The decision we had to make is we are going to need to tap into the capital. It's very difficult to tap into capital with real estate. We can't fractionally sell your real estate. You can borrow against it, but it's not press a button, borrow against it. You have to reapply for a mortgage and qualify for the mortgage. And then can you write off the interest when you use that proceeds of the loan to sustain your regular lifestyle? There's too many factors. So it's much simpler and much more guaranteed to simply do, let's say, a corporate bond ladder or some sort of traditional asset that is liquid and going to pay dividends or interest or whatever so that the child can be sustained. And then how are we going to get that money? We need that money to be there. It has to be guaranteed. So this is where the life insurance component comes into it, a permanent life insurance. We have a need for a certain amount of money guaranteed. We want to tax shelter the growth. So we accept a smaller rate of return, and we're going to have the amount of money that we are predicting we are going to need at their death.
Yes.
Because you predict their time of death, which you can do quite accurately in order to sustain the child for the rest of their life. And that's the one component of their financial plan, whereas the other child is very entrepreneurial. So I'd like to leave that child generational wealth. I'd like to leave that child properties. And then whatever other liquid assets they have can pay the taxes at death. So in this particular case, they'll need multiple wills because they have corporations. I prefer not to go to someone who does wills haphazardly, but someone that's spending 40% or more of their time on wills and estates.
And and the reason for that is because a small mistake in some of these wills can be very costly, correct?
Yes, it could be one of the most costly mistakes you could ever make. A great example would be we have a very, very, very wealthy client.
Okay.
They're in their 70s and they just didn't even have a will, or they hadn't had a will updated in maybe 20, 30 years. We did an estate freeze for them and they told me, Fab, I want to cut my daughter out of the will.
First, what's an estate freeze?
An estate freeze, they own multiple corporations and multiple assets. What we do is we freeze the value. This is the first component of their estate plan, right? They already have a large life insurance policy from before. They would never qualify right now anyways, but they have cash, life insurance, multiple properties, and a business. So even though they're in their 70s, they're still active in the business and it keeps growing in value. And they've got like pockets of properties that are right now being used in the business that could be sold to a developer.
Oh, wow. Got it.
Tons and tons of money that they bought for a goat and a bag of rice back in, the 50s, right? So, or whenever it was that they bought it. So these assets continue to grow in value. We know that they're at the tail end of their lives. So what we do is we freeze the value of all their assets right now and transfer the growth with the children as beneficiaries of the trust. They wanted to cut the daughter.
So they can handle all the taxes or your transfer.
Well, no, because this is how you build that generational wealth. You freeze the value. You know what your tax bill is when you're going to die. Yeah. We can plan.
All future growth is transferred over to the trust.
And then we repeat that on the next generation and the next generation and so on and so forth. So you're perpetually deferring tax generation after generation.
You are handing over some of the responsibility of future tax to the next generation in this trust, but that's accepted and okay.
Well, they end up with more in their pocket in anyways, right?
Got it. I just mean some kids might not even want that, but in general they would, because there's some assets and wealth there, obviously.
Exactly. Okay. So from that particular perspective, getting back to your original question of give me an example of estate problems, they're like, I'm cutting the daughter out. I said, okay, I'm not the lawyer. I'm the numbers guy. From a numbers perspective, it doesn't matter. From a practicality perspective, I know it matters. Sat down with the lawyer, did the estate freeze, put the will together, cleaning up the deed of trust. When the trust is settled, you write who the beneficiaries are and so on and so forth. And we were able to convince this couple not to cut the daughter out. Said, listen, a situation like this, you can make some inter vivos or during your lifetime transfers to the other children. There's nothing wrong with gifting. There's no gift tax in Canada. Canada. However, cutting one of the children out completely, especially that since that child also has a grandchild, is going to lead to estate litigation. And the lawyer estimated that the
cost of that is just
like
prohibitive.
$500,000 of estate litigation just in legal fees. So they're looking at it, they're okay, we're not going to cut her out. We're going to do this, that, and the other, enough to like keep everybody satisfied. So there is no estate litigation, but a will can be challenged, an estate can be challenged.
Will you now start talking about Bitcoin a little bit in somebody's allocation? How are you thinking? I know this is evolving, brand new. What are your latest? Because before, I don't even think you could talk. Are you allowed to even talk about it? You are, or you're not?
So I have to be careful because I can't be
giving advice.
From a regulatory perspective, I can't hype up
an
asset class that I'm allowed to sell. Really.
Got it. And I don't want you to hype it. I guess the perspective I'm coming at is like, there's a trend happening. And I just feel like, listen, in the early 2000s, I saw a trend where everything was going into the cloud. Accounting software was going into the cloud. I was screaming. I went to NetSuite. They went public for $1 billion on the New York Stock Exchange. I remember telling my friends who worked at Oracle that this company was going to explode. They couldn't see it. They were in the industry. And I feel like I'm back at that place like, hey, there's this thing that looks like it's getting regulatory blessings. I know Elizabeth Warren in the US right now is kind of after a little bit, but there is this thing that's going to be an ETF shortly, like pay attention to it. And I feel like 10 years are going to go by and people are going to look back on something like Bitcoin, like they did Amazon, going, oh yeah, like that took off. I wish I really paid more attention closely. Is there anything that I don't want you to hype it up, but is there anything you're paying attention to, thinking about when I say all this? I know it's a difficult thing and I'm not framing it as a direct question.
Let me give you my stand. None of this is a religion to me. I don't believe in Bitcoin or disbelieve in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. It's not a God that I need to believe in. I'm looking at all asset classes. And if some sort of an asset class is going to fit into this particular person's financial puzzle and solve this person's financial situation, and they can psychologically handle it, and I'm allowed to advise on it, I'm going to consider it 100%, whether it's Bitcoin, an ETF, a piece of real estate, a life insurance policy. To me, it matters not. If Bitcoin or any other similar type of asset class becomes commonplace, you can bet that it's going to be eaten up by institutions and utilized by institutions. I'm not a stock picker per se. There's people that all their job is to do is to allocate the funds. My job is to take you and your family, understand your psychology and your attitude towards money, and build a plan to get there. You have to keep up with emerging technologies. It might sound like a crazy analogy. Why do we think the dinosaurs died out? They were really well adapted to the situation 65 million years ago, but it changed very quickly. And then we came about, mammals, right? We were just this little thing scurrying around, but we were able to adapt to the situation. So if you get too comfortable in one asset class or in one situation and the tables get turned, the world changes very quickly or very rapidly, and you're not able to adapt to that new world, everything you said is going to come to fruition.
So you're in a tough spot then. With your clients, I guess then every year, do you do a review? And then after like a 5-year period, when you see a landscape change greatly, perhaps you have to adjust the entire financial plan? How does that work in your industry?
You're sort of adapting all the time, right? There are certain fundamentals that I think when you look to the past have always worked, right? So if you're going to be in stocks, let's say you want to buy some companies, if you have the attitude like, look, I'm going to get established companies that are intertwined into the economy and are constantly profitable, you're going to get a certain amount of return from that company. You're probably going to get a dividend and you expect a reasonable rate of return over the long run, but you're not going to get the situation of like Amazon, from buying Amazon back in the day and then it shoots up like crazy. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
But now a company like Amazon or Apple or whatever, these are now massive institutions.
Yeah, they're pillars now. Yeah,
they're pillars. Let's call them blue chips. I'm not saying go out and buy them, but they've become something different from what they were in the past. So an asset class like Bitcoin, for example, you get some people that are religious about it on both sides. On both sides of the equation. It's people that are religiously believe in it. So they're like,
I like to think I have some facts on my side, Fab.
And then there are people, they appear publicly to be religiously against it, right? I would encourage anyone to just take the belief out of this and just look at the facts, look at the asset class and say, does this fit into my plan?